Cassandra sat behind the counter of the pharmacy, watching the rain through the window. Drops ran down the glass, blurring the silhouettes of passers-by. She was mechanically sorting through the prescriptions when she heard a familiar voice. "Working overtime again?" Robert, her immediate supervisor, appeared in the doorway of the office. Cassandra straightened up, adjusting her name tag on her white coat. "Someone has to do this. You need to rest." He came closer. "It's been 3 months without a day off." "I like my job," she replied, avoiding his gaze. Robert sighed. "You know that's not the point. After the divorce—" "Don't," Cassandra interrupted him. "That was 3 years ago." She stood up and walked over to the shelves of medicines, pretending to check the expiration dates. In reality, she just needed an excuse to turn away. "Cassandra, your shift ended 2 hours ago." "I'm in no hurry." Her voice sounded flat, almost indifferent. "I'm not even allowed to have a cat in the apartment I'm renting." A phone call interrupted their conversation. Cassandra picked up the phone. "City Pharmacy, how can I help you?" "Daughter," her mother's voice sounded tired. "Did you transfer the money?" Cassandra felt her shoulders tense. "Yes, Mom. I sent it yesterday." "Medicines have gone up again, and the rent—" "I know," Cassandra interrupted her gently. "I'll send more next month." After the call, she looked at the monitor for a long time, where her salary for the month was displayed. The numbers seemed like a mockery. 38 years old, a university degree, 10 years of experience, and she was still counting every penny. "You know what?" Robert suddenly said. "Go home. It's an order from the boss." Cassandra wanted to object, but realized he was right. She packed her things and went out into the rain, clutching her umbrella tightly. Another lonely evening was ahead of her in a strange apartment with only the most basic furniture, where she still sleeps on a sofa bed because her ex-husband had to leave her bed. He said it was expensive, a designer bed, and now his new wife sleeps on it, young, successful, with her own apartment in the center. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained overcast. Cassandra was wiping the glass windows when the bell above the door quietly announced a visitor. An elderly woman walked into the pharmacy, shaking water droplets off her old blue coat. "Good afternoon," she greeted in a quiet voice. "Can I see your heart medicine?" Cassandra nodded and went to the appropriate section. "What kind of drugs are you interested in?" The woman took out a prescription from a worn bag, neatly folded in 4. "Here," the doctor prescribed it, "but I would like to know the prices first." Cassandra took the prescription. The doctor's handwriting was clear. Heart medication, quite expensive. "My name is Serena," the woman suddenly said, as if apologizing. "Serena Foster." She stood there, nervously fumbling with the handle of her bag. She was wearing everything clean and tidy, but very old: her coat, her shoes, and her scarf. Cassandra noticed that the sleeves of the coat were neatly hemmed. They must have been worn. "You see," Serena spoke quietly, "the pension is small. And this medicine, maybe there are some cheaper analogs." Cassandra began to count the options. Even the cheapest analogs were not cheap. $275, she finally said. Serena turned pale. "Oh, that's more than I thought." She slowly opened her wallet. Cassandra could see her hands shaking. There were several crumpled bills in the wallet. "I only have 230, Serena whispered. "I was thinking, maybe next month." Her eyes filled with tears. She tried to hide it by looking at the floor. "You know," Cassandra suddenly said, "we have a special promotion on these drugs today." Serena looked up. "A special?" "Yes," Cassandra continued confidently. "A 20% discount on cardiac medications. That means—" she quickly counted, "exactly 230. "Really?" Serena asked incredulously. "But why isn't it mentioned anywhere?" "It's a new campaign. We haven't had a chance to put up an ad yet." Cassandra began to gather the medicine, avoiding the old woman's gaze. She knew she was breaking the rules, that she would have to cover the difference out of her own pocket. But the image of her mother, who also counts every dollar for medicine, haunted her. Serena took out the money, old, worn banknotes, carefully smoothed out. "You have no idea what this means to me," she whispered. "I was thinking of borrowing, but all my friends are pensioners." Her eyes suddenly became moist. "You know, I used to help people too. I was a nurse in a children's hospital, 43 years. And now—" She stopped talking and took Cassandra's hand. "Thank you. You don't even realize how kind you are." Serena carefully put the medicine in her bag and headed for the exit. At the door, she turned back. "Take care of yourself. People like you are a real treasure." After she left, Cassandra took out her wallet and added the difference to the cash register. $45 was almost a day's pay, but for the first time in a long time she felt something like joy. In the evening, while recounting the day's earnings, Robert noticed an inaccuracy in the documents. "Something doesn't add up with the prices of the hearts," he frowned. "I must have made a mistake when entering the data," Cassandra replied calmly. "I'll check it tomorrow." She knew he didn't believe her, but she also knew he wouldn't ask any more questions. In her 10 years of work, this was not the first time she had made a mistake for the sake of those who had it harder than she did. A week had passed since Serena's visit. Cassandra was just filling a new order when the bell rang to announce another visitor. A tall man in an impeccable gray suit walked into the pharmacy. He stood in stark contrast to the usual customers, pensioners and mothers with children. "Miss Cassandra Mayfield?" he asked, looking around the room. "Yes, that's me," she replied, feeling inexplicably anxious. "My name is Michael Burns. I represent the law firm Burns and Associates." He put his business card on the counter. "I need to talk to you about an important matter. It concerns Miss Serena Foster." Cassandra felt her heartbeat quicken. "Did something happen to her?" "Unfortunately, yes. Miss Foster died 3 days ago." His voice sounded professional and distant. "She left a will, and you are mentioned in it." Cassandra stared at the notary in shock. "This is some kind of mistake. I've only seen her once in my life last week." "There's no mistake." He took a folder out of his briefcase. "Miss Foster amended her will the day after you met with her. She came to our office in person." "But why me?" Cassandra felt her hands shake. "I just sold her the drugs." Michael Burns looked at her more closely. "Miss Foster left a letter explaining her decision, but I can only discuss the details in an official setting. Here is the address of our firm." He handed her another card. "Would tomorrow at 10 o'clock suit you?" Cassandra automatically took the card. "I'm working tomorrow." "This is very important, Miss Mayfield," he interrupted her. "There are certain deadlines that we must meet." At that moment, a young mother came into the pharmacy with a crying baby. Cassandra glanced at her watch. It was time to dispense prescription baby formula. I'll try to come," she told the notary. After he left, Cassandra looked at the business card for a long time. The office was located in the business center of the city, in one of those glass towers she had never entered. It all seemed unreal. "Who was that?" Melissa asked, coming out of the back room. "It looks like someone important." "A notary," Cassandra answered. The word felt foreign on her tongue. "A notary?" Melissa was surprised. "Did something happen?" Cassandra shook her head. "I don't understand." "Do you remember that old lady I sold the medicine to last week? The one in the blue coat? At a reduced price?" "Yes. It turns out she died, and for some reason she left me a will." Melissa whistled. "Wow. I don't think so." Cassandra remembered Serena's worn wallet. She barely had money for her medicine. "Maybe it's some kind of scammer." Melissa suddenly became worried. "There are so many scams nowadays." This thought had already crossed Cassandra's mind. She looked at the business card, again glossy paper, gold embossing, an address in a prestigious neighborhood. I don't know, she sighed. I have to be at their office at 10 tomorrow. So, you're going? Melissa looked at her anxiously. What do I have to lose? Cassandra smiled bitterly. Except for an hour of working time. All evening she couldn't calm down. She looked through her wardrobe, trying to find something suitable for a visit to a law firm. The only business suit she had left was from her marriage, and now it was too big. Before going to bed, Cassandra looked at herself in the mirror for a long time. Why had Serena chosen her? Was it because of the $45? And what could she leave behind the old apartment? The furniture? Her debts? She managed to fall asleep only in the morning. She dreamed of Serena standing at the counter and repeating herself, "People like you are a real treasure." But now her voice sounded different, almost ominous. The Burns and Partners office occupied an entire floor in a glass skyscraper. Cassandra felt out of place as the security guard examined her documents. The old suit she had decided to wear seemed even more out of place. "Miss Mayfield?" The young receptionist smiled pleasantly. "Mr. Burns is waiting for you." The notary's office was impressive in size. Huge windows overlooked the city, and the massive mahogany desk seemed to cost more than her annual salary. "Please, sit down." Michael Burns pointed to a leather chair. "No, thank you." Cassandra tried to sound confident. "I'd like to understand what's going on." The notary opened a familiar folder. "Before we get to the will, I have to give you a letter from Mrs. Foster." He handed her an envelope. Cassandra took it with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat, almost calligraphic. "Dear Cassandra, if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer here. Do not be sad. I have lived a long life and was ready for this. But before I go, I want to explain my decision. I used to be more than just a nurse. My husband, William Foster, was a successful architect. We had a beautiful home, 2 children, and what seemed like a perfect life. But fate decreed otherwise. First, we lost our son. He died in a car accident. A year later, our daughter died of cancer. William could not withstand this blow. His heart stopped right in his office. I sold everything: the house, cars, jewelry. I kept only a small apartment in the center where William and I started our lives. I gave the money to charity, to the children's oncology department. The last years were difficult. People either avoided me or looked at me with superior pity. Poor Mrs. Foster, such a tragic fate. I learned not to expect anything from others. But you didn't know my story. To you, I was just an old woman who didn't have enough money for medicine. And you helped, not for gratitude or recognition, but simply because you could not do otherwise. I cried when I left the pharmacy. Not out of self-pity. For the first time in many years, I cried with joy, because I realized that good people still exist. My apartment is not that big and needs some repairs, but it's in a good neighborhood, close to the park where William and I used to go for walks, and most importantly, it is fully paid for with no debts or encumbrances. I want it to go to someone with a good heart. To you, Cassandra. Love, Serena Foster. Cassandra felt tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't even try to wipe them away. "Is this all legal?" she asked, finally looking up. "Absolutely," Michael Burns replied. "Mrs. Foster was of sound mind when she changed her will. By the way, she left you more than just the apartment." He took out another document. "Here is a bank account. It's not a big amount, $15,000. She wrote that it was for repairs and new furniture." "I can't accept this," Cassandra whispered. "It's too much." "Yes, you can," the notary interrupted her gently. "And you know what? In 20 years of practice, this is the first time I've seen a will that has really fallen into the right hands." He began to take out the documents for signature. Cassandra looked at them but couldn't concentrate. The image of Serena stood before her eyes, not the life-weary woman she had met in the pharmacy, but a young, happy woman with a husband and children. What was her life like before the tragedy? What did she dream about? What did she feel when she lost everything she loved? Miss Mayfield, the notary's voice brought her back to reality. Do you need time to think? Cassandra shook her head. No, I'll sign it, but not for my own sake, for the sake of her memory. Cassandra stood in front of the apartment door, holding a bunch of keys in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly as she inserted the key into the lock. A click, and the door opened. Sunlight poured in through the large windows, illuminating the small but cozy living room. The old furniture from the 50s was arranged with great care, with everything in its place. On the walls were black and white photographs in simple wooden frames. Cassandra walked closer to one of them. A young couple in front of this very window, Serena and, apparently, her husband William. They were smiling, so happy, so in love. Other pictures show children, family celebrations, ordinary moments of life that were suddenly cut short. It's unbelievable, she whispered to herself. On the kitchen table was an old cookbook, open to a recipe for apple pie. Cassandra carefully turned the pages, writing notes in the margins. William likes it with cinnamon. Kids like it with ice cream. The bedroom had a large wooden bed with an embroidered bedspread. On the nightstand were reading glasses and an unread book. It seemed that the owner had just left for a minute and was about to return. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Cassandra jumped in surprise. An elderly woman from the neighboring apartment stood on the threshold. "Excuse me," she said. "I saw the light and decided to come in. I'm Marta. I lived next door to Serena for 30 years. Cassandra invited her in. You must have known her well." "Oh, yes." Marta sat down on the old sofa. "We often had tea together. You know, she changed a lot after all those tragedies, but she never lost her dignity." She looked around. "Nothing has changed here since William died. Serena said that their love lives within these walls." "I don't know if I have the right to change anything here," Cassandra said quietly. Martha looked at her carefully. "Serena told me about you before. We had a long talk that last night. She said, 'I can finally leave in peace. I have found someone who deserves this place.'" Cassandra felt something tighten in her throat. "But I didn't do anything special." "You did something that very few people do today. You saw her as a person, not just an old woman." Martha stood up. "Do you know what else she said? This apartment needs a new life, new dreams, new love." When Martha left, Cassandra stood by the window for a long time, looking at the old park below. There, on a bench, Serena and William used to sit, dreaming of the future, not knowing what lay ahead. Suddenly she noticed an envelope on the windowsill. Inside was a letter written in the same neat handwriting. "Dear Cassandra, if you are reading this letter, it means you are already in the apartment. Do not be afraid of changes. This house is waiting for a new life. I left everything the way it was, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Make this place your own. Paint the walls, buy new furniture, hang up your photos. The only thing I ask is that you keep the album on the bookshelf. It contains the history of not only my family, but also this house. And one more thing. In the kitchen, in the top cabinet, you will find an old piggy bank. I used to put some money there every month for people who needed help. Continue this tradition if you can. Take care of yourself and be happy. Serena." Cassandra wiped her tears and went to the kitchen cabinet. The piggy bank was there, an old metal box with the inscription, "For Good Deeds." Inside were several $100s and a list of names with amounts opposite. She pulled out her phone and dialed Robert's number. "Hi, listen, remember our conversation about discounts for seniors? I have an idea." Cassandra looked out the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in warm colors. Somewhere out there, she was sure, Serena was smiling.